So people often ask me, how is forgiveness part of conflict? Have you ever been hurt by someone and thought to yourself, if they'd only apologize, I'd be willing to forgive them and move forward? Or alternatively, perhaps you've had the opposite feeling, I will never forgive them for what they've done. So if you felt either of these, then you know that forgiveness and conflict are very closely related. So stay tuned as I discuss 4 different forgiveness challenges and how each can facilitate a different kind of conflict resolution. So let me just start by saying that forgiveness is this incredibly powerful tool in conflict resolution. It can allow for healing, it can allow for restoration, and that restoration can sometimes rebuild or restart relationships, and it can sometimes bring closure, it could sometimes rebuild trust. And I want to say that it's also a really fraught topic. And it's fraught because at least some people worry that forgiveness gets detached from accountability, or that forgiveness is a cop-out for holding people responsible and accountable. But in fact, those things are actually different. So forgiveness and accountability can sit side by side. So I want to talk about some different kinds of forgiveness. I want to be clear as I talk about each of these 4 kinds that I'm not saying these are the only kinds of important forgiveness in conflict. It's just 4 that we ought to think about. And the first of these, right, I think is the one that we often think about most, which is deciding to forgive the other person in a conflict. So why might that be important? Well, quite apart from whatever they may or may not get from that, in fact, quite apart from whether they even want forgiveness, deciding to forgive someone else actually can bring some closure for you. It's interesting to me how many faith traditions talk about the importance of forgiveness. And when they do that, they're typically not talking about it from the perspective of all the great things that the other person will get, but often from the kind of peace, the kind of closure, the ability that you get to move forward in your own life so that you're not harboring resentments, that you're not harboring anger, that you're not looking for revenge. And so it is true that if you forgive the other person, right, there could be great benefits because they accept that forgiveness. It helps you rebuild the relationship with them. But I want to say that from a conflict perspective, the decision to forgive the other has a lot to do with bringing benefits to yourself. So second, and a variation on this, which I think is really challenging, at least it can be for me and maybe for you at times, is allowing others to forgive us. So sometimes what makes that hard is that allowing others to forgive us means an admission that maybe we did something wrong, or even if it wasn't wrong, that we did something that was hurtful, that was a breach of the relationship. And yet when we allow others to forgive us, we have an opportunity to really grow as a person. We allow ourselves to receive the grace and the mercy from somebody else. And I will just say, at least in my own experience as a human being, that is something that is both hard, but also is a real reminder of my own frailty, my own vulnerability, and frankly, my own kind of sinfulness, my flawedness as a person. So third, and I think a really hard thing to do, is asking someone for forgiveness. So asking for forgiveness shows a tremendous amount of personal vulnerability because there is this sometimes non-trivial risk that the other person will say no. And yet it is also a real growth opportunity, a real way to kind of heal and put past conflicts behind us. In fact, most 12-step programs, a part of that is having the courage to go to do a self-examination of things that you might have done perhaps as part of your addiction that were hurtful to others, that breach relationships, and going back and asking for forgiveness. Let me share with you a powerful example in my life of someone asking for forgiveness from me. So, in fact, many years ago, I had a friend who went through a really, really challenging substance abuse problem. And during that time, it was a real trying experience in our friendship. In fact, this was somebody that I was planning to become a roommate of. So at the very last minute, literally a few days before I was scheduled to move in with them, I learned that they had been stealing money from friends and family. And I made this last minute decision that I just couldn't move in with them. And because I needed housing, I ended up in what I will simply say was an absolutely atrocious housing situation and paying a huge amount of money for the rental. So imagine my reaction years later when this person came to me and asked me for forgiveness. Now, it turns out our friendship had continued even through this hard time. But years later, that asking for forgiveness was extremely powerful for me, and I think very important for him. And so learning to ask forgiveness is another way to help resolve conflicts and heal wounds. The last form of forgiveness I put last because I think for many of us, it's the toughest, and it's learning to forgive ourselves. So forgiveness of self is really important because often we talk about conflicts with others, but often we have a lot of internal conflicts. And forgiving ourselves, I want to really, again, separate from taking responsibility. Taking responsibility is important. Holding ourselves accountable is important. But once we've done that, allowing ourselves to move forward and to heal is really essential if we're going to be integrated and successful and happy. So I want to share a real life story about the importance of forgiving ourselves as a way to resolve both internal conflict, but also as a way to capacity build ourselves to be in fuller and more authentic relationship with others. So this involves someone from many years ago, and I'm not going to say more than that. But in short, this is somebody who previously in his life, for a brief period of time, had been charged with some caretaking of his brother while his parents were away. And during this period, another family member, very sadly, had committed an act of sexual assault against his brother. And years later, that act of sexual assault and the fact that this older brother was unable to intervene and stop it was still eating at the internal core of the older brother. And in fact, was stopping him from having a full relationship with his younger brother now in adulthood, and with other family members, and frankly, with other people in his life more broadly. And part of what was challenging, right, is the amount of shame, the amount of just this overtaking of responsibility stopped him from being authentic and real with others. It cramped and limited his ability to handle conflicts of all sorts. And so working with this person, helping them to realize that, yeah, there may have been a few things that he could have done to intervene, but what was happening was so beyond the pale for someone in his teenage years to be held responsible for, and finding that space to offer some real forgiveness for himself was the thing that opened up a new capacity for conflict handling, for more authenticity in relationships, and for, frankly, a closer relationship with his brother and with others. So when we talk about forgiveness, right, it is such an important part of conflict resolution. And to be clear, it is so very hard and complicated. So when we think about forgiveness and conflict resolution, we should be thinking about different categories, right? One, the one that I think we think of most frequently, which is our capacity and decision to forgive the other. Two, what it takes for us to allow others to forgive us. Three, the real challenge of asking for forgiveness from someone else. And fourth, what it takes to forgive ourselves. This is an incredibly complicated project. In fact, so many times people say things to me like, What does it mean to forgive in the face of, for example, ongoing injury? Or what happens if forgiveness is rejected? And what are the dangers of forgiveness? These are all important and worthy concepts for further consideration. But as you think about your tools in conflict resolution, forgiveness is a key one of them. So if you want to learn more about tools for managing conflict and resolving disputes, watch this next video, which is what is the most important negotiation skill? And of course, before you go, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could subscribe to this channel, hit the button, and like this video. Of course, you want to know that secret negotiation skill. Keep on watching.